The words hit Jonathan like a punch to the gut. He staggered back, his mind reeling. What are you talking about? Daniel was my only son. He didn't have any siblings. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Daniel didn't know about Sam, she explained. I was pregnant when he died. I never got the chance to tell him. Jonathan's world seemed to tilt on its axis. He stared at Sam, seeing Daniel in the boy's eyes, in the shape of his face. It was like looking at a ghost, a living, breathing reminder of the son he had lost. Jonathan stood frozen, his mind struggling to process Clara's words. Daniel had a brother. A son. This boy, Sam, was his grandson. The weight of the revelation pressed down on him, and for a moment, he felt like he couldn't breathe. Why didn't you tell me? Jonathan finally asked, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. All these years, I didn't know. I could have helped you. I could have been there for him. Clara looked down, her hands clasped tightly together. I was scared, she admitted. After Daniel died, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any family, and I didn't think you'd believe me. You were so distant, even before the accident. I thought you'd think I was lying, just trying to get money or something. Jonathan's heart ached at her words. He had been distant. He had been so consumed with his work, his empire, that he had neglected his own son. And now, he was faced with the consequences of that neglect, a grandson he never knew existed, living in poverty because of his own ignorance. Sam, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Are you really my grandpa? He asked, his voice small but filled with curiosity. Jonathan knelt down so he was at eye level with the boy. Yes, Sam, he said softly. I am. And I'm so sorry I didn't know about you sooner. Sam studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. It's okay, he said. Mom says you didn't know. But are you going to help us now? Jonathan's eyes filled with tears. He reached out and gently placed a hand on Sam's shoulder. Yes, Sam, I'm going to help you. Both of you. You don't have to live like this anymore. Clara stepped forward, her expression a mix of relief and apprehension. Jonathan, I don't want your money, she said firmly. I just want Sam to have a better life. He deserves that. And he will, Jonathan replied, standing up. But not just because of money. Because he's family, and family takes care of each other. Over the next few days, Jonathan made arrangements for Clara and Sam to move into a small but comfortable apartment near his home. He hired a tutor for Sam and helped Clara find a stable job. But more importantly, he spent time with them, getting to know Sam, learning about Clara's struggles, and slowly building a relationship with the family he never knew he had. One evening, as they sat together in the apartment, Sam looked up at Jonathan with a shy smile. Grandpa, he said, can you tell me about my dad? Mom says he was really brave. Jonathan's heart swelled with emotion. He nodded and began to share stories about Daniel, his laughter, his kindness, his dreams. As he spoke, he realized that this was what he had been missing all these years, not the wealth or the success, but the connection, the love, the sense of belonging. As the days turned into weeks, Jonathan's life began to change in ways he hadn't imagined. He started spending less time in his office and more time with Sam and Clara. He took Sam to the park, helped him with his schoolwork, and even taught him how to ride a bike. For the first time in years, Jonathan felt alive, like he had a purpose beyond his business empire. Clara, however, was still cautious. She appreciated Jonathan's help, but she was wary of his wealth and influence. She had spent years struggling to provide for Sam, and the idea of relying on someone else, especially someone as powerful as Jonathan, made her uneasy. One afternoon, as they sat in the apartment, Clara finally voiced her concerns. Jonathan, I'm grateful for everything you've done for us, she said carefully, but I need to know what happens next. Are we just a project to you, something to make you feel better about the past? Jonathan was taken aback by her question. He had been so focused on making up for lost time that he hadn't considered how his actions might be perceived. "Clara, this isn't just about guilt," he said earnestly. "Sam is my grandson. Your family. I want to be a part of your lives, not just for now, but for good." Clara studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I believe you," she said, "but it's going to take time. For all of us." Jonathan understood. He knew that trust couldn't be bought or rushed. It had to be earned, one small step at a time. Meanwhile, Sam was thriving. He loved spending time with his grandfather and was eager to learn everything he could about his father. One day, as they sat together in Jonathan's study, Sam asked a question that caught Jonathan off guard. "Grandpa, why didn't you and Dad get along?" Sam asked innocently. Jonathan sighed, his heart heavy with regret. "I made a lot of mistakes, Sam," he admitted. "I was so focused on my work that I didn't make time for your dad. I thought I was doing what was best for him, but I was wrong. I didn't realize how much he needed me until it was too late." Sam thought about this for a moment, then said, "But you're here now. That's what matters, right?" Jonathan smiled, his eyes filling with tears. "Yes, Sam, that's what matters." Jonathan Hayes was a man who had everything: luxury cars, a sprawling mansion, and a fortune that seemed endless. But none of it mattered, not since the day he lost his only son, Daniel, in a tragic accident 5 years ago. Every Sunday, without fail, Jonathan visited Daniel's grave in a quiet, tree-lined cemetery on the outskirts of the city. It was the only place where he allowed himself to feel the weight of his grief. One Sunday, as Jonathan approached the grave with a bouquet of white lilies, Daniel's favorite, he noticed something unusual. A young boy, no older than 10, was sitting cross-legged in front of the headstone. The boy's clothes were tattered, his face smudged with dirt, and his hair unkempt. He looked like a beggar, someone who had been living on the streets. Jonathan froze, his grip tightening on the flowers. Who was this boy, and why was he here of all places? The cemetery was private, and strangers rarely wandered in. He cleared his throat, his voice sharp but tinged with curiosity. "Hey, kid, what are you doing here?" The boy turned, his wide eyes filled with a mix of fear and defiance. For a moment, they stared at each other, Jonathan, tall and imposing in his tailored suit, and the boy, small and fragile but with a spark of resilience in his gaze. Without a word, the boy scrambled to his feet and bolted, disappearing into the dense woods that bordered the cemetery. Jonathan stood there, stunned. He dropped the lilies and took a step forward, but the boy was already gone. His heart raced, not just from the sudden encounter but from the questions swirling in his mind. Who was that boy? Why had he been at Daniel's grave? And why had he run away? That night, Jonathan couldn't sleep. The image of the boy haunted him, his thin frame, his dirty clothes, the way he had looked at Jonathan with those piercing eyes. There was something about him, something familiar, that Jonathan couldn't quite place. He needed answers. The next morning, Jonathan called his private investigator, a man named Marcus who had helped him with countless business matters over the years. "I need you to find someone for me," Jonathan said, his voice firm. "A boy, about 10 years old. He was at my son's grave yesterday. Find out who he is and where he came from." Marcus didn't ask questions. He simply nodded and got to work. Meanwhile, Jonathan's mind was consumed by thoughts of the boy. He had spent years building walls around his heart, burying his pain in work and wealth, but now those walls were beginning to crack. Marcus worked tirelessly for days, following every lead he could find. He combed through security footage from the cemetery, interviewed nearby residents, and even reached out to local shelters and schools. Meanwhile, Jonathan's impatience grew. He couldn't focus on his business meetings or his usual routines. All he could think about was the boy and the mystery surrounding him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus called Jonathan with an update. "I found him," Marcus said. "His name is Sam. He's been living on the streets with his mother, Clara. They've been moving from place to place, trying to stay under the radar. From what I've gathered, Sam visits the cemetery regularly. He's been doing it for months. Jonathan's heart raced. Where are they now? He asked, his voice urgent. They're staying in an abandoned warehouse on the east side of the city, Marcus replied. It's not a safe place, Jonathan. If you want to meet them, I'd advise caution. Jonathan didn't hesitate. He grabbed his coat and headed straight for the warehouse. As he drove through the city, his mind raced with questions. Why had Sam been visiting Daniel's grave? What connection could a street kid possibly have to his son? And why had Clara been hiding all this time? When Jonathan arrived at the warehouse, he was struck by its bleakness. The building was crumbling, its windows shattered, and its walls covered in graffiti. He stepped inside, his expensive shoes crunching on broken glass. The air was damp and cold, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the empty space. Hello. Jonathan called out, his voice echoing. Is anyone here? For a moment, there was silence. Then, from the shadows, a small figure emerged. It was Sam. The boy looked even more fragile up close, his clothes hanging loosely on his thin frame. He stared at Jonathan with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Who are you? Sam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm Jonathan Hayes, Jonathan replied, trying to keep his tone gentle. I'm Daniel's father. I saw you at his grave. Can you tell me why you were there? Sam hesitated, glancing over his shoulder. From the darkness, a woman stepped forward. She was thin and weary, her face lined with hardship, but there was a strength in her eyes that caught Jonathan's attention. I'm Clara, she said, her voice steady but cautious. Sam's mother. We didn't mean to intrude on your grief. We just needed a place to remember. Jonathan frowned. Remember what? What does my son have to do with you? Clara took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. Daniel was Sam's brother, she said quietly. As the weeks went by, Jonathan began to see the world through Sam's eyes. He noticed the small things, the way Sam's face lit up when he learned something new, the way he laughed when they played games together, the way he looked at Jonathan with trust and affection. It was a reminder of what he had lost with Daniel, but also a chance to make things right. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony watching the sunset, Sam turned to Jonathan and said, Grandpa, do you think Dad would be proud of us? Jonathan's heart swelled with emotion. He put an arm around Sam's shoulders and pulled him close. I think he would be very proud, Sam. And I think he's watching over us, smiling. As the months passed, Jonathan, Clara, and Sam settled into a new rhythm. The once lonely billionaire now found joy in the simplest moments, breakfasts with Sam, quiet conversations with Clara, and the shared laughter that filled their home. For the first time in years, Jonathan felt like he was part of a family. But not everything was easy. Clara still struggled with trusting Jonathan completely. She had spent so many years relying only on herself that it was hard to let someone else in. One evening, after Sam had gone to bed, Clara sat down with Jonathan in the living room. I need to be honest with you, she said, her voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. I'm still scared. Scared that one day you'll wake up and realize this isn't what you want, that we're too much for you. Jonathan looked at her, his expression soft but serious. Clara, I understand why you feel that way. I've made mistakes in the past, and I can't change that. But I want you to know that I'm here for you and Sam, not out of obligation, but because I care about you both. You're my family. Clara nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I want to believe that, Jonathan. I really do. But it's hard to let go of the fear. Take your time, Jonathan said gently. I'm not going anywhere. Their conversation marked a turning point. Slowly but surely, Clara began to open up more, sharing her hopes and fears with Jonathan. She told him about her struggles as a single mother, the nights she had gone without food so Sam could eat, and the constant fear of losing him. Jonathan listened, his heart breaking for all she had endured. "You're incredibly strong, Clara," he said one evening. "Stronger than anyone I've ever known. And I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that alone." Clara smiled faintly. "I wasn't alone. I had Sam. He's always been my reason to keep going." Jonathan reached out and took her hand. "You don't have to do it alone anymore. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Meanwhile, Sam continued to flourish. He excelled in school, made friends, and even joined a soccer team. Jonathan made it a point to attend every game, cheering loudly from the sidelines. After one particularly exciting match, Sam ran up to Jonathan, his face glowing with pride. "Did you see my goal, Grandpa?" he asked breathlessly. Jonathan grinned and ruffled Sam's hair. "I did. You were amazing out there. Your dad would have been so proud." Sam beamed, then hesitated for a moment. "Grandpa, do you think maybe one day we could visit Dad's grave together? I want to tell him about everything." Jonathan's heart swelled with emotion. "Of course, Sam. I think that's a wonderful idea." The following Sunday, Jonathan, Clara, and Sam visited Daniel's grave together. It was a crisp, sunny morning, and the cemetery was quiet except for the rustling of leaves in the wind. Jonathan carried a bouquet of white lilies, while Sam held a small drawing he had made, a picture of him, his mom, and Jonathan standing together under a rainbow. As they approached the grave, Jonathan felt a lump form in his throat. He hadn't been here with anyone since Daniel's funeral. Seeing Sam and Clara beside him made the moment feel both bittersweet and healing. Sam knelt down in front of the headstone and carefully placed his drawing next to it. "Hi, Dad," he said softly. "It's me, Sam. I wish I could have met you, but Grandpa's been telling me all about you. He said you were really brave and kind. I hope I can be like you someday." Jonathan placed a hand on Sam's shoulder, his eyes filling with tears. "He would be so proud of you, Sam. Just like I am." Clara stood quietly beside them, her arms wrapped around herself. After a moment, she stepped forward and placed a hand on the headstone. "Daniel," she whispered, "I wish you could see how much your son has grown. He's so much like you. And I wish you could see how much your father has changed. He's been there for us in ways I never thought possible. I think you'd be proud of him too." Jonathan's breath caught at her words. He had spent so many years carrying the weight of his regrets, but in that moment, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in a long time. He knelt down beside Sam and placed the lilies on the grave. "Daniel," he said, his voice trembling, "I'm so sorry for all the time I wasted. I wish I could go back and do things differently. But I promise you, I'll take care of Sam and Clara. I'll be the father and grandfather they deserve. And I'll make sure Sam knows how much you loved him, even if you never got the chance to meet him." The three of them stayed there for a while, sharing stories about Daniel and reflecting on the journey that had brought them together. For the first time, Jonathan felt like he was truly honoring his son's memory, not just by visiting his grave, but by building a future with the family Daniel had left behind. As they walked back to the car, Sam reached for Jonathan's hand. "Grandpa," he said, "do you think Dad can hear us when we talk to him?" Jonathan smiled down at him. "I think he can, Sam. And I think he's always with us, in here." He placed a hand over his heart. Sam nodded thoughtfully. "Then I'm going to talk to him every day, so he knows I'm okay." Jonathan's eyes welled up again. "That's a great idea, Sam. He'd love that." Months turned into a year, and the bond between Jonathan, Clara, and Sam grew stronger with each passing day. Jonathan had sold his mansion and moved into a smaller, cozier home closer to Clara and Sam's apartment. He wanted to be near them, to be a constant presence in their lives. His priorities had shifted entirely, no longer driven by wealth or power, but by the love and connection he had found with his family. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Clara turned to Jonathan with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking," she said. "Sam deserves more stability, a real home. And I think we're ready for that, all of us." Jonathan looked at her, his heart swelling with hope. "Are you saying what I think you're saying, Clara?" Clara smiled. "Yes. I think it's time we moved in together, as a family." Sam, who had been quietly drawing at the table, looked up with wide eyes. "Really? We're going to live together?" Jonathan laughed, the sound warm and full of joy. "If that's what you want, Sam, we can find a house with a big backyard for you to play in. Maybe even get a dog." Sam's face lit up. "A dog? Really? Can we name him after Dad?" Jonathan's eyes softened. "That's a wonderful idea, Sam. I think Daniel would love that." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. They found a house, a spacious but cozy home with a large backyard, just as Jonathan had promised. On moving day, as they unpacked boxes and settled into their new home, Jonathan felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. This wasn't just a house, it was a home filled with love and the promise of a brighter future. That night, as they sat together in the backyard under a sky full of stars, Sam turned to Jonathan. "Grandpa," he said, "do you think Dad's watching us right now?" Jonathan looked up at the stars, a smile tugging at his lips. "I know he is, Sam. And I think he's happy that we're together, happy that you're safe and loved." Clara reached over and took Jonathan's hand, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly, "for giving us this chance, for giving Sam the life he deserves." Jonathan squeezed her hand. "Thank you, Clara, for trusting me, for letting me be a part of your lives." As they sat there, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the night, Jonathan realized that he had finally found what he had been searching for all along, not wealth, not success, but love. The kind of love that heals, that transforms, that makes life worth living. And as he looked at Sam, his grandson, and Clara, the woman who had become like a daughter to him, Jonathan knew that this was just the beginning. Together, they would build a future filled with hope, laughter, and endless possibilities.